There is a smell that lives in the back of your skull long after everything else is gone. Not blood, not burning. Something older. Something that has no right to exist above the ice. I was 19 years old in the winter of 1944. By then I had seen Stalingrad reduce men to animals. But the war was honest. It killed you with things that had names. What waited at Coordinate 7 had no name. Or rather, it had one we were not meant to speak. They sent 6 of us into that frozen nothing. 5 came back. Then 4, then 1. Some secrets should stay buried. Some doors were sealed for reasons that have nothing to do with men. Our orders came from no division commander I had ever heard of, stamped with a seal I didn't recognize. We were told, locate a German weather station at grid. 7-9er. Assess. Report. Do not enter structures without authorization from the political officer. The political officer was a man called Vasiliv. Not a soldier, not a scientist. Something between the two. The kind of man who watches others breathe to see if they're lying. He carried no rifle, only a leather satchel he never opened in our presence. And he was never cold. In 40 below, never cold. The wind didn't howl out there. It screamed, like a dying god dragged across the ice by its own entrails. At -40, the Tokarev in my holster became a metal ghost. Useless. Decorative. You stopped trusting your weapons. You started trusting your gut. Your gut said, turn back. We found the weather station on the second day, or what remained of it. The antennae were still upright, impossibly upright for something abandoned. No bodies, no waste, no footprints in any direction, as if the German crew had simply been subtracted from the world. We go down, Vasiliv said. Not asked, not ordered. Stated, the way a doctor states a terminal diagnosis. Mikhail, my best rifleman, looked at me. I had no answer for him. I was 19. I believed in duty. I believed in the party. I did not yet believe in what lives beneath. Beneath the station floor, a shaft, steel-lined, German engineering, flawless even now. The smell hit us before the ladder did, ozone like a room full of frozen lightning. And underneath it something biological, something that remembered being alive. The bunker stretched in all directions like the inside of a cathedral built by people who hated God. Banks of machinery, not German, not Soviet, not American. The circuitry used no materials I had ever seen. The panels were etched with geometries that hurt to look at directly. The eyes kept sliding off like water off a hot pan. Private Ositrov, our engineer, touched one of the panels. The entire wall hummed like a living thing finding its voice, then went silent. Ositrov wiped his hand on his coat for the rest of the hour. He never explained why. The Germans had been here for years. We could see it in the detritus of occupation. Ration tins. Field journals with pages torn out by violence, not by hands. Equipment built to measure something rather than to observe the weather. Seismographic arrays the size of automobiles, oriented not upward toward the sky but downward, into the ice. Vasiliv moved through the bunker like he had memorized its blueprint. He paused at nothing, checked nothing, knew exactly where he was going. I followed him, not because I was ordered to, because something in the way he moved suggested that whoever stayed behind would be in greater danger than whoever stayed close. The cavity opened at sub-level 3. The Germans had carved it, or rather had found it, and widened it slightly, the way a surgeon opens a wound that was already there. The cavity dropped 40 meters into glacier ice older than civilization. The walls were translucent, and through them, I have spent 40 years trying to find the right words for what I saw through that ice. I've tried in Russian, in German, in silence. No language is built for it, because language is a human invention and what we saw predated us. Predated everything that walks or breathes or dreams. It was vast. That is the only word that holds weight, not large, vast. The way geological time is vast. The shape of it was wrong in a way I cannot attribute to angle or lighting. Part of it was biological, you could see that. Limbs that weren't limbs. A geometry of flesh that had never evolved on this surface. And part of it was mechanical, not assembled, grown into function. Structures like ribs that were also antennae. A central mass that pulsed with a light that carried no heat. Eyes, if they were eyes, arranged in a lattice across what might have been a face. Closed. Or perhaps simply not yet aware that we were there. It was frozen, or it was waiting. Even now I cannot tell you which. It has been here, Vasiliv said quietly. Not to any of us specifically, for 112,000 years. He pulled a device from his satchel. Not Soviet manufacture. He began to take readings. He did not look surprised. Not even slightly. Then the ice began to breathe. That is not metaphor. That is the only accurate description I have. The walls of the cavity contracted and released, slowly, rhythmically, with a precision that matched nothing geological. Nothing we had science for. Osatrov screamed first. He was closest to the wall. Mikhail raised his Mosin. The gun. At what? I couldn't say. There was nothing to aim at. The threat was everywhere and nowhere. Structural. Atmospheric. Biological. Vasiliv seized his arm. Not to calm him, to prevent the shot. He said, "And this I will carry to my grave. You must not alert it to vibration." Alert it. The word sat in the air like nerve gas. Vasiliv had known his mission was not to assess the station. His mission was to take readings while the entity was still dormant. To verify the German findings without triggering what the Germans had triggered. That was why there were no German bodies. There was no German crew. They had not evacuated. They had been absorbed. Every last one of them absorbed into something we had no category for, and Moscow knew. Moscow had known since 1942. The cavity walls cracked along a seam the length of a rail line. Not breaking, opening. Osatrov ran. We heard him for 11 seconds. Then we did not hear him. Mikhail fired twice into the ice. Reflex, not strategy. And the sound of those two shots traveled down into the cavity like stones dropped into a bottomless well. There was no echo. The shots were simply swallowed. The light in the central mass changed frequency. Slower, then faster. Then it pulsed once, a single beat, and the temperature in the bunker dropped 20 degrees in 4 seconds. I felt it in my lungs like breathing broken glass. Vasiliv grabbed my arm. His face, for the first time, showed something that was not calculation. It was not quite fear. It was the expression of a man who has studied a fire his entire career and has only now understood that it is aware of him. "We leave," he said. "Now. Without running." "Running," he explained as we moved. "Still calm, still measured, creates vibration. Vibration is the stimulus. It does not hunt by sight or by heat. It hunts by the disturbance you make in the world simply by being afraid. Pyotr didn't make it to the shaft. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't look back. Vasiliv had told me not to look back, and I have never in my life been more grateful for an order. I was the only one to reach the surface. Vasiliv was behind me on the ladder, and then he wasn't. I did not hear him fall. I did not hear anything. I simply looked down, and there was only darkness where he had been. His satchel was still in my hand. I don't remember taking it. I walked 14 kilometers to the forward post in a whiteout. Without goggles, without a map. On nothing but the knowledge that if I stopped moving, I would die. And dying here meant being found by something that had already eaten. 6 German scientists and 4 Soviet soldiers without leaving a single gram of evidence. 3 days later, men in unmarked uniforms came for the satchel. They told me nothing. They asked me nothing. They simply looked at me in the way that people look at a problem they've decided to leave unsolved. Within a month, the coordinates around Grid 79 were designated a restricted flight zone. No military justification was ever published. No weather station was listed in any German wartime record we were permitted to access. The shaft was sealed, we were told, with concrete. 40 meters of it. But concrete is a human solution. And what is down there is not a human problem. Sometimes in the years since, I have thought about that single pulse of light, that one slow beat from the central mass. And I wonder not whether it was waking up. I wonder whether it was simply acknowledging us. The way you might acknowledge a fly that has landed on your hand. Before you decide what to do with it. The zone is still restricted. The ice is still there. And 112,000 years is a very long time to be patient. What do you think it has been doing down there while we have been busy having our little wars?